Hello, welcome back to the Ardent Group and Scott Hunsaker talking about how do we transfer that institutional knowledge and business savvy to the next team. In the previous video, we talked about authentic conversations, how are we transferring the institutional knowledge and the business savvy so they have the ability to make timely and accurate decisions. Today, we're going to talk about how are you identifying your leadership team. You know, when I was the CEO of my organization, even with all the assessment tools we have in the industry today, I was only effective at getting the right person in the right seat on the bus about 70% of the time. If we're only getting about 70% of the time the right person in the right seat on the bus, what makes us think we're going to be any better at picking the next leader? And if we pick the next leader and we're wrong, what happens to the value of our organization? What happens to the confidence of our leadership team that they have the skill set to carry this organization into the future? So what if instead of picking the next leader, we create a leadership team bench of candidates and then we use some type of metric to identify those that have the will and the ability to lead? You know, I would submit if nothing ever changed in your organization, you don't need leaders, because what's working today is going to work tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, until what? Until something changes. So how are we identifying those that have the will and ability to change? A proven business tool that I found very successful with this was strategic planning. Strategic planning has been around forever. Harvard first documented it back in the 1920s. Typically, you take all that information that we talked about earlier in the authentic conversation piece. You identify opportunities for improvement, you categorize them, prioritize them, and develop strategic initiatives for going forward. There's a lot of different ways to do strategic planning. One of the methods that I enjoy is SMART goals. Come up with the overriding strategic initiative and the tactical steps with owners and due dates. Now the key here isn't the plan, it's the planning. And nothing happens until we execute the plan. So how are you going to hold the leadership team accountable for executing the plan? Well, we had a 3 strikes rule. In other words, if you didn't meet the expectations of the team, if you didn't meet your obligations on executing the strategic plan, we called that a miss. And the first time you had a miss, you had to buy donuts for the strategic planning team. Okay, not a really big deal. I don't believe a strategic planning team should be more than 10 people, because anything over 10 people is public speaking, and that's not a leadership team, that's a committee. Now the second time you had a miss, you had to buy lunch for the company. Now we were 50 people and we were all over North America. So you're shipping pizzas all over North America. That wasn't the expensive part. The expensive part was you had to stand up in front of the company. We were all video linked together and tell them why. That you didn't meet the expectations of your peers on the leadership team. The third time it happened, you self-selected off the leadership team. Now that happened 3 times. The first time was a gentleman that had been there forever. He was our walking Wikipedia, and he came to me, he goes, Scott, you know, I just want to go back and do my job and make our product. Can I do that? Sure. And we got him in the right seat on the bus. But do you think I would have bent that gentleman's nose out of joint if I hadn't given him the opportunity, given his tenure with the organization? I recognize as leaders we'd always have the luxury of time, but if we do, I find it much easier for them to find their own seat on the bus. Now the second person that came to me was somebody that was kind of like ready, aim, 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 ready, ready, aim. In other words, paralysis through analysis. But they were great in customer service, so we got them in the right seat on the bus. And the third is somebody I'm going to call the mouth. Maybe you have somebody like this on your leadership team. In other words, they have a solution for everybody else's problem, but don't take responsibility for theirs. So they self-selected off the team. We didn't let them go, but 2 years later they left our organization because they didn't fit our culture. Now let me tell you about the good. You know, there was one individual on paper that looked like he was going to be the next leader of the organization. He had the MBA background, all the financial background, but another individual constantly demonstrated his will and ability to lead the organization. So when it came time to select a new leader, this individual was the natural leader. And when he became the leader, did all the other candidates get frustrated and leave? No. You see, during this period of time, they had developed the strong working relationships and the understanding, and they all recognized that he was the natural leader as well. So my question for you is, how are you identifying those in your organization that have the will and the ability to lead? So our next topic that we're going to be talking about in the video is going to be talking about how do we transfer that institutional knowledge out of our heads into the organization. I want to thank you again for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next video.